In this video, I'm going to explain how I created this vibrant, fun little animation I called Escape the Illagers. I'm going to explain how I chose the location and the idea behind it originally, and I'm going to explain how throughout the process I changed my mind on various different things. I'll also be producing a second video which will take you through all the animation, simulating the marble and also how I did the characters, all the way through to the lighting, materials and textures, and finishing it all up with post-production and sound. So with all that said, let's get into it. In this animation, I knew I wanted to include a pillager outpost, which is there. From there, I knew I wanted some sort of area around it, which turned out to be a bar. And I knew I definitely wanted to go through some training grounds and have what turned out to be a ravager pen, but a ravager at some point doing something. And then I had almost zero idea about how I was going to actually finish this. So the first thing, and even though it's already completely built here, is that I needed to find a good location, which is simply a case of scouring around this entire landscape. And I found this outpost. It's on a hillside, and it looks like the marble could maybe get some momentum going down there. But yes, I chose this location and then just rolled with it from there. So I definitely had this idea of having some sort of cell, and I had a little look online to find some good ideas for what a cell might look like. I built this out of cobblestone with a few different cracked and mossy variants. There's some candles there, which I don't think was in the actual animation, and I built a little place for the marble to sit, even though it definitely doesn't sit. It just rolls. I've also got a little seat here for the guard to sit on, and there's a skeleton there, a skeleton head. But if you look at the animation, that's actually a pumpkin head. And the only reason for that is that I completely forgot to change the textures once I'd exported the model. So I saw it and I just went with it, and I thought, do you know what? These things happen. I'm not going to worry myself about it. The idea eventually became that there was a guard sat in this seat. But before that, I actually had this idea of Steve coming from behind here somewhere and opening the cage door, the cell door. But I thought that's going to be a little bit cumbersome. There's going to be quite a lot of waiting for him to get over to the door, open it up and then let him out. And I thought, well, how is he going to get down from this place? And it all just didn't feel quite right to me. So instead, I went for what I thought was the more humorous approach, and having a guard sat down here asleep and dropping his crossbow. So that's what I went with. As I was designing this cell, I was thinking, and as I do all the way through these, thinking all the time, where is this marble actually going to go? And will some of these blocks change to be bits of track? And in this particular case, I knew the steps were going to be a bit of track. I wasn't entirely sure how the track was going to go down here, but I knew I wanted it to go down here and somehow work its way through the structure of the building. There's something about seeing the marble disappearing into things. I don't quite know what I like about that. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas, or if that's just something I'm just completely making up. So you can see there's this, what is it, a trapdoor balcony that I've created. It looks a bit daft, but I needed somewhere for the marble to go through this structure and fall off the edge here and then get back into it, because I sort of imagined that the guards would be around the outside looking outwards, looking for dangers, and that the marble would be sneaking behind. And like most of these things, when it comes to creative stuff, it's 50% planning up front and then 50% just going with it and seeing what happens, which I tend to do a lot in these marble runs. So onto the next area, I decided to build some sort of little Illager bar. I've got a couple of little bar stools, a little counter, that's what you call it. And I imagined inside there would be a little, a bar steward, bartender. And there's some sort of various different bits and bobs there to make it look like a bar. I thought that was a cool little design. It's within keeping of the outpost. It's using all the very similar materials. And also I noticed that in the design there is some logs. Here they are there. And so what I did is I built some more logs over here and imagined that the track would go into these logs and then naturally flow over the top here. And it would flow over the top of this bar area, knocking over some Illagers. But I wasn't entirely sure how the Illagers were going to animate or be hit at this point, but I just sort of went ahead in confidence, knowing that I'll probably do a reasonably good job with the layout that I've got here. So for the next section, I felt I needed to sort of get away from the outpost a little bit, and that there would be some sort of guard on guard duty here, waiting for any intruders to come past, and that the marble would sneak around in some way and go underneath this bridge. And it's worth noting that this bridge and the river, I built that into this scene. And although for the most part I actually have the structures and the marble follow the sort of natural design or layout of the landscape, for this bit I really felt there needed to be some sort of transition so that it felt like we were going from the outpost to a completely new section. And I do that actually quite a bit in little subtle ways. And there was something probably quite on the nose, and that is that I actually stopped the camera at this point very briefly in the animation and have an arrow hit this sign which says training camp on it. So it couldn't be any more on the nose that we're going to the training camp. Going on to the next section, which is the training area, I imagine that the Vindicators would be using their axe to batter away at these pumpkin hay bale things, and I imagine the Illagers shooting their bows at these various different targets up the top there and down below. And just as I went through it, and I started at the top here and worked my way down, I thought, how will the marble run through here potentially? Where will it go? I ended up creating this staircase, and then as you see in the animation, I actually had it sort of roll over to the right here and then go back on itself, because it's quite nice to actually bring it back over to the left sometimes, or to use the height. And in this particular case, I actually had the marble traveling down, and it just adds that little touch of bright and darkness to the flow of the animation. So the next area that the marble moves over to is the ravager pen, and before that there's this sort of transition area that I've got in here. I knew I wanted the marble to go through this tree. That felt quite cool to me, and that I needed to somehow block off the Vindicators from being able to chase the marble, which turned out to be this little fence and then a little steeped area. Now I know in Minecraft it would completely go around there, the Vindicator would go around there, and also down those steps, which I built as well into it. So it is a bit daft, but using the camera I blocked that off so you couldn't see it. And if you notice in the animation, I don't have the camera show the ravager pen until the very last moment. I would say building some sort of tension, but maybe just not giving the game away too early. And then as the marble travels down here, we show the ravager in its pen. I'm quite pleased with this little ravager pen that I've got here. There's some iron trapdoors there, which that lever is pulled to open them up. I'm not sure if you picked up on that on the animation. Then the idea was that the marble would go into this little arena with Illagers all the way around the outside. It would follow some track and try to escape the ravager. And I was thinking, do you know what, I'll have some Illagers on the top of here as well, which actually turned out to only be one. It's a neat little area, but it's, as I'll explain later on, it caused a couple of problems and some things I'd wish I'd done in hindsight, but I'll get onto that in a little bit. So moving on from the ravager section, we have this little transitional area where we move over to the university. Again, I've got one of these on-the-nose signs that tell you exactly where we're going, so you can have a little look at the university. That is what it is. It's pretty rubbish, really, but using the camera to my advantage, I blocked everything off so you get the sort of sense that maybe it's a little bit of a bigger location. And yes, just being very careful in the final animation not to show too much. There was this lovely little cave underneath, which I dressed out with cauldron. Yeah, I think there's your cauldron. Then I had some sort of idea about it going through underneath this balcony, rolling underneath this dock, and popping out this side and getting into a boat. Now, I did mention earlier on at the start of this video, I had no idea how it was going to end. So let me show you something. Just over here, there is a cave. And my intention was to completely have the marble come over here in some ways, but didn't know how I was going to do it, and that it would basically escape through here into a cave. But like I was saying earlier on, a lot of these things change, 50% planning, 50% just going for it and seeing what works. Well, that brings us to the end of this part. I hope it's been interesting so far. In part 2, we're going to talk about how I did the animation of the characters and how I simulated the marble. and how I actually built the track into all of this stuff, because it's a bit difficult and there's lots of backwards and forwards, and well, you'll see in part 2 exactly the various different things that I have to do to get it all to work. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please do leave me a comment, and if you have any feedback or constructive criticism, then I'd love to hear it. I hope you're enjoying all the marble runs, and I'll speak to you again in part 2.